Honda Aquatrax R12X Turbo. It's a 2005 model, but the principle is the same for most of these particular engines. Once you've taken the airbox off the side of this inlet side of the motor, then you can actually get to the Allen key head bolts to undo this inlet manifold and drop it back out of the way. First of all though, before you remove the inlet manifold, you'll have to disconnect some of the looms, some of the different tubes there. Take off the rocker cover. This particular pipe here goes to the rocker cover. Take off the fuel rail. I usually put bolts back where I got them from, wherever possible, so that I don't lose them or misplace them. And then put a sock over the end of the bits that I hang outside of the motor area. Unbolt the bracket that holds the exhaust cross member here, the cross pipe. Unbolt that off the back of the head, and then loosen off that clamp, and then the clamp that's also down on the other end of the pipe, which is on the red piece of hosing down there. And that way you can actually pull this pipe up and out of the way off the top of the turbo. Then this is the cam positioning sensor. So that basically, if I can try and get in here, you can see there where it bolted up to the back of the head. So you unbolt that and then you carefully pull that out. This exhaust manifold was bolted on. Reach underneath, use a tool to release the tension on the cam chain, then follow the correct sequence of undoing the outside bolts first on the actual cam retainers, working your way to the center. Take those off. I always store them just in a box with all the bolts and stuff. To remove the actual, when the chain's loose, to remove the cams off of the actual head itself, you start with the inlet cam, manipulate that, get it off of the chain. Then you get the exhaust cam, manipulate it slightly and get it off from underneath the chain. And that starts to clear the top of the engine. Little bolt on the side here is, move the camera the wrong way, is the cam guide that goes down in there. So you pull it back a little bit this way, manipulate it around, and then it comes up. So that is the cam guide. Then you can see this exhaust manifold is still bolted up to all the wastegate and the turbo setup and everything. So I reached down, undid all the bolts on the exhaust manifold here, used a rubber mallet, gave it a soft tap along, and then it released off of the head, and you can see that this has moved out of the way. The whole lot has moved across slightly, so that has freed up all of the manifolds and the parts from the head. This is another plug for a wiring loom. So sort of any of the wiring looms and stuff like that. You can see over here for all the coil packs, disconnected all of them and then moved them out of the way. So that's the process for pulling everything off to remove the head off of a Honda Aquatrax engine. Then it's just all the head bolts. So you can see, as mentioned in other videos, I've got a chain guide holder, screwdriver through here holds the chain as well. So now when I undo all the head bolts, I can carefully lift the head up, and then the head can be sent off for rework or whatever you need to do. You can check the pistons and things like that while the head's off. But this video is prominently for showing a brief outline of some of the things that you just need to pull apart to remove the head off of the engine. A couple more things that I forgot to touch base on before. Need to take that bolt out just to remove that loom clip, and then I'll put the bolt back in and then take the hose off of this because that's all connected to that head as well. And through the process you'll see other things like the engine coolant temperature sender unit, take the plug off of that. So there are a few of the things that I forgot to mention before. Plus, when you're working by yourself, sometimes you need to create other hacks to make life easier. So what I've done here, clamped a bit of wood to the back of the hull, and I've mounted a metal bar to it. It's just screwed in along the back. You can screw in a piece of wood, it doesn't really matter. It's got a piece of wire and hook hanging around the chain. The reason for this is when you're lifting the head up, once it's all unbolted, once you start lifting it up, that chain has to go down through the head. So you need to create a few little things here. I like to itemize everything that I take off. This is all clamped into place so it can't move, so it can hold the chain. When you start lifting the actual head up and off, chuck a couple of blocks of wood underneath. So when you're lifting it up, get a block of wood underneath that end and this end to hold it up off of the actual engine itself. And then because the head's being held up high enough, then you can use carefully a clamp going in. Hopefully I'll explain this enough. Going in as best as you can from this side, underneath the actual head itself. And you want to carefully grab the chain underneath the head. So that will hold the chain in place underneath the head, and then you can unhook it then off of this because the clamp is then holding it down from the underside of the head. And then you can carefully lift the head up. That chain will be held underneath the head by the clamp, so it will just flop down to where the clamp is. Then you can take the head up,